The year was 1969, and each member of the Beatles sat at attention around the long rectangular table in their studio office. The meeting had been called by John out of the blue, and tensions had been mounting. What it must have felt like to be a fly on that wall during that fateful day, when everything those four young men had ever known was about to be swept away by the winds of yesterday. To see each of their faces, the gentle sadness in George's eyes, the shock in Ringo's, and that devastation in Paul's, it would have been heartbreaking for anyone to witness. The words came hard and fast like a punch to the gut. John had changed. Something had shifted. So when he spoke, that language flew out like arrows, darts, bullets. It's over. I'm leaving the group. I want a divorce. I'm done. George and Ringo were deeply wounded, but they'd at least live. John's decision to walk away from one of the biggest bands the world had ever seen racked each of them to their cores, but one member in particular straddled the line between life and death. As if shot through the heart, Paul, the typically upbeat Beatle, lost his bearings and immediately fell from a consciousness of gold to one of utter despair and darkness. The answer to the question of whether or not he'd survive looked grim. Paul felt his identity, his passion, and his soul begin to disappear as he walked out of the office that day, barely managing to hold back his tears. This single moment in time would lead to Paul's dark night of the soul, to tumbling to unimaginable lows and hitting rock bottom so hard it would take a miracle to pull him out again. In 1969, the world's biggest rock star hid on a remote farm, too depressed to get out of bed, and no one knew if Paul McCartney would ever make music again. Paul's eyelids slowly blinked open as the blurry room came into focus. The simplicity of the house on his Scottish farm on the island of Kintyre now functioned as an escape from the crushing weight of the world outside of it. Raindrops could be heard lashing onto the tin roof as he shifted his sleeping position to his side, facing the nightstand. Immediately, his head began to pound as his body awoke to its dehydrated, weak state. So, like the day before, he reached for that half bottle of Glen Scotia whiskey and dragged it to his lips. That alcohol burned as it flew down his mouth and throat, and thoughts of his life and his loss and his depression flickered for a few moments until his stomach began to feel warm. The smell of bacon and the sound of his baby crying suddenly became more muted as the whiskey turned everything down. The despair of the rock star's most notable existential crisis had to be numbed, because, as he put it, everything I'd ever known, gone. In the blink of an eye, his life purpose had seemingly been snuffed out. Paul, like many, had lost his way. The yellow brick road suddenly had been cut off, setting him down Alice's rabbit hole instead. This new wonderland was fraught with illusions about his talent and delusions about his future. Even his dreams threw self-deprecating curveballs and soul-crushing nightmares to him. Paul continued to sleep, letting the booze lull him back to a state of rest because, in his mind, this was all of his life that was left. Sleep. Alcohol. Anger. Redundancy. Hopelessness. And a total loss of self-faith. Paul's beard grew like the ivy outside his window over the months that he remained in his melancholic state. What was the point in shaving, in bathing, in breathing fresh air, when his bed served as a reprieve from a pain so poignant he couldn't bear to face it? He hadn't just lost a brother, he'd lost a creative partner, and one who had both challenged and inspired him. Both Paul and John lived in an otherworldly realm of musical magic and genius, and Paul had to be asking himself, who am I without him? Who am I without the Beatles? Who am I without music? Nothing. I'm nothing. I'm nothing at all. Paul once said that it wasn't just losing the band, it was breaking from the lifelong friends. The loss of George and Ringo felt like the loss of family as well. The financial bickerings and feuds, it left Paul feeling anger, deep, deep anger. And not just with his mates and himself, but with everything in the world. This spiritual death had taken its toll completely, and it had to become something he just could not pull himself out of alone. Rise and shine, my love. Linda said that to Paul dozens of times over the Scottish winds pushing against the house, leaving the faintest scent of salt water in the air. I've made your favorite breakfast. You need to eat something. In our darkest moments, we would all be so lucky to have someone as kind and loving as Linda in our lives. Her sunny disposition matched her bright blonde hair, and it seemed nothing that was too tough ever got her down. Her resiliency was that of a sparkling sylph, like the elements alive, and well outside their door echoed in Scottish fairy tales. A new mother glow added to her golden aura as her nurturing side grew exponentially every day, blanketing her own husband's gloom with grace. How about we go outside today? Motivating Paul beyond his colossal sadness paralysis was no easy feat. But after months of grief and pain, one day, Linda decided something needed to change. Perhaps it was the Christmas decorations she had just put up, or the sound of carols softly playing on the radio down the hall, but maybe today was the day to at least get out of bed. Paul has said in an interview about that time that I didn't shave for quite a while. I didn't get up. Mornings weren't for getting up. Then, if I did get up, I'd have a drink, straight out of bed. After a few more tugs on the bottle, Paul unfurled himself from beneath the green and red stitched quilt, begrudgingly lunging towards something other than the nothingness of sleep. A little cold air might do me some good, he thought. The love from his darling 4-month-old Mary and his spectacular wife did on occasion pull him out from under the dark clouds of his emotions and his own enslaved mind. Every day was a baby step. And even in those, sometimes went 10 steps back before making 1 step forward. When we lose something so powerful and beautiful that it's nearly indescribable in our lives, we're faced with the possibility of either death or rebirth. And for those of you who know this feeling, you know how hard it can be to choose rebirth. Can you imagine how hard this all must have been for Paul, singer and songwriter of songs that to this day still transform hearts and mesmerize us all? We can imagine a bundled up Mary strapped to Linda's chest as the couple held hands while walking over the muddy cold earth. The soft rolling hills surrounding the farm were speckled with random spots of white, the sheep they were tending to. The green of the island's nature was a welcome contrast to the busy streets of London. In Paul's turmoil, at least there was the peace of the wild. And certain moments during one's darkest nights of the soul can turn from numb to razor sharp. Perhaps on a day like this, Paul turned to Linda, his eyes welling with tears as he searched for the words to express himself. "Help me," he said. "Help me take some of this weight off my back." Like the emerald environment that surrounded them, soaking up the nourishing raindrops from the sky, Linda's green eyes filled with tears. She must have known right then and there that her beloved was drowning in desolation. As she threw up her arms around him with Mary in between, the family hugged softly in silence. And then she whispered into his ear, "You've always fixed things with music. Pick up your guitar." What must have Paul experienced as the most sincere and genuine answer suddenly became visible after being invisible for so long? Love has a funny way of pulling a person out of collapse by shining light on what the darkness has forgotten. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe Paul could put his pain into notes, melodies, lyrics, and the catharsis of making something beautiful out of something which had been annihilating. Maybe, just maybe, something could bring him back from apathy to amazement. Over the next few months, Paul's energy began to shift. He began to embrace music again. He hummed, he strummed, and he loved his family as he channeled the guidance of his own Celtic ancestors. and by the end of January, he'd written, "Maybe I'm Amazed." It's an ode to the love that he had for Linda, and her ability to help him be born again. Those lyrics tell a story of his dark night of the soul so well. Baby, I'm a man, maybe I'm a lonely man who's in the middle of something that he doesn't really understand. Baby, I'm a man, and maybe you're the only woman who could ever help me. Years later, Paul said that Linda's words had transformed him. She made me see I was surrounded by con men and leeches, and she encouraged me. With 9 simple words, she brought hope back into his heart. It's worked for you before. Pick up your guitar. Music came back into Paul's life with an astounding resonance, as love made him realize nothing internally had been lost. Rebuilding from the inside out, Paul was like the phoenix who had been burned by the music industry and the loss of the Beatles. Little did he know that through this conflagration, he would die and turn to ash, only to be reborn into something stronger and more potent. And that is something we all must learn in life, isn't it? That losing people or circumstances externally is an opportunity to find self-love and confidence from within. Paul was pushed to the edge, we can even say to an end, but Linda showed him how to love himself. So the cycle regenerated, and he learned to fly again. Before that song was released on McCartney, Paul's debut solo album, and later found its place on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time, there was the moment of its inception. We can all imagine that fireplace crackling as Paul discovered the perfect piano chords, scribbled his most lovely lyrics, and glanced at his baby and wife both smiling back at him. We see the bed made up, the Glen Scotia whiskey back in the cupboard, and a freshly shaven face. And then we hear the grateful, purpose-filled, hopeful lyrics flow out in perfect pitch as he sings of love and renewal. Baby, I'm amazed at the way you help me sing my song. You right me when I'm wrong. Maybe I'm amazed at the way I really need you. Paul found hope through Linda's love and music during one of the darkest periods in Beatles history. I've got 2 questions for you though. What do you remember about this time when the Beatles were breaking up? And what memories do you have of music helping you through your own tough times? It honestly blows my mind that only 15% of my viewers are actually subscribed, because it really helps my channel reach more people. And yes, I know I've taken a break, but I'm back now and I can't wait to share more amazing rock stories every single week with you all. If Paul's story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who lived through Beatlemania or just needs to hear about finding hope in dark times. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.